Hey, so if you've been making money at all, have a business, own a business, creator, whatever, inside of the internet, then you've been making money inside of the attention economy. Unfortunately for you, there's a big reset coming, and if you watch this video, you're going to understand that. You probably have a good idea where I'm going with this. Buyer pools are shrinking, the actual architecture of the internet is changing, and trust is evaporating, and that's leading to a diminishing return for people, especially in the info and high ticket spaces. You have been extracting value out of Web 2.0, social media, organic, and even ads. Then you have been playing in the attention economy, okay? And you're probably exposed really to what's coming next. So we are going to go over that, all of that in this video. Because what's coming next is something fundamentally different, and you could argue that it's probably a lot better for consumers, but it's going to be a massive and rapid change, especially for anybody who has been running the old playbook. If your business is reliant on ads, if your business is reliant on scaling with content, you've got a problem, friend. I'm going to go over that all in this video. The why, the how, the when, what's going to replace it, all of that. If you understand these principles, you can start to get in front of the problem. You'll make more money and hopefully have a more resilient business down the line. In the past, you could basically brute force a business. Whoever could spend the most to acquire a customer would win. And I think that this is going to change dramatically soon. Those who could command the most attention in the market through ad spend or through scaling up content are actually going to be potentially at a disadvantage to other types of players who have been building something quite differently. By the way, if you have an idea, if you want to launch or transition a business, if you're a founder, if you're somebody who's making money in the old way of doing things and you're interested in packaging your expertise into an offer and put $1,000 to $10,000 in the bank within the next 90 days, just go below this video and book a call with me. So briefly, why is the attention economy going away? How's it going away? When's it going away? And what's going to replace it? The why is simple. Capitalism. Capitalism is a never-ending wheel that wants to just constantly improve, be more and more and more efficient. And as it gets more and more efficient, it grinds the old ways of doing things down. We've seen this in almost every technological revolution, including the internet, mobile phones, agriculture, the plow, whatever. So that's how all technological revolutions work. And the one that we're in right now is arguably much bigger, on a much bigger scale. So how? Artificial intelligence and a changing internet infrastructure. Now, you might be sort of thinking that, AI is just a gimmick, or AI is just an app, or AI is just a cool toy. Wrong. It is actually a fundamental shift in how we operate and work on the internet itself. And if you haven't been paying attention to the releases of some of the big companies like Google, they're building something entirely different. A new gateway to the internet itself, a new layer of functionality that consumers and individuals will interact with and potentially never have to do things like go to websites, mobile apps, your stupid funnel, your course, etc. So when is this going to happen? I mean, the early estimates are somewhere between 2025, 2027. The higher range estimates are more like 2030. It could happen anytime in the next 5 years. Whenever AGI or ASI, artificial superintelligence, hits, as the architecture underneath the internet changes, everything that we do, how we interact, and how we make money on the internet is going to change with it. So what is going to replace it? What will be essentially the new foundation of the internet? Well, I would argue that it's trust. So we are moving into what is being called the trust economy. There's a big problem happening right now in business. People are just not buying. Buyer pools are shrinking, and part of the problem is that there is an overabundance of options, an overabundance of bad, scammy, commoditized products and content. And that means that the share of trust for each individual operator out there is shrinking, which means that the share of buyers is shrinking. So one of the highest leverage things that you can be doing right now is to cultivate trust. Think about it like this. Okay, you're hit with an ad by a coach. You buy his offer because the copy and the marketing and the positioning tug on all your pain points, and it's something that you really want. Now, something was broken in that process. You didn't do a lot of research, because if you had, you might have found that there's 10 other coaches with much higher trust signals, way more testimonials, way more peer proof. And if you had just known about any of those operators, you probably would have chosen one of them, right? And the problem with the attention economy is that it has drowned out a lot of those signals. Whoever had the most leverage in terms of capital in buying ads, it didn't matter if their products necessarily were great or if they had a lot of really great trust signals, they could capture the most market share. And that is where we will have a fundamental shift. Now, I can't remember which Facebook group. Nothing Held Back Facebook group. Fantastic Facebook group, by the way. Can't speak today at all. Now, the conversation centered around this ever shrinking share of market for info products, coaches, etc. So my point here is basically that the much wider problem than just there being a lot more operators in the market is that there's a problem, there's a broken trust problem, okay? So this problem was already happening with the rise of social media, and AI just poured gasoline on it. Because content and ads are cheaper, they're easier to create, and the barrier for getting attention is getting closer and closer to zero. In other words, anybody and everybody can just go out and buy and get a ton of attention. And with the waves of highly commoditized AI content, you have an even bigger problem, because the mountains of slop are just starting to overwhelm everything out there, which means more and more operators are fighting for less and less mind share. Let's first kind of go over in detail a little bit more about the old way of doing business, let's call that Web 2.0, and what's coming, which is essentially the agentic web powered by trust. Now, Web 2.0 describes what we all know and love as the social web, but powered by websites, mobile apps, social media, and knowledge operators who are disseminating information, whether they have good or bad intentions, that is irrelevant. They use the viral mechanisms built into all these products to get more and more and more attention on whatever their narrative and message is, or they essentially buy ads to buy that attention, right? In this economy, this is generally how, at a very top level, how people found and purchased products. Somebody got their attention, the individual did some research, and they purchased. Okay, that's just very, very top level. The funnel might look dramatically different for different operators. Now, how do people get that attention? They did it through content, websites, SEO, social media, search, and generally through advertising. Again, there's a lot more nuance in here. And what would happen at that point is the consumer would become product aware, potentially solution aware, and start to move through the funnel. And at this stage, typically they would do a lot of research, okay? They would search on Google, they would search on social media, and they would start to talk to their friends and family. They would start to look at their budget. They would start to maybe talk to their advisor with the financial product, and they would start to look for a lot of social proof. Look for trust, right? And that is the key element. They had to go out and find that trust, and that trust was often buried by other attention economy operators. And even if they found that trust, it was often hijacked by bad intentions. So you could be on these big social proof websites that could be totally gamed by fake reviews, fake testimonials, etc., right? Now, once somebody finally got some confidence, the typical next thing they would do is either buy or move on to the next product, right? The onus was often on the consumer to do all that work to figure out if they wanted to buy something, and that was what left them open and vulnerable to a ton of scams, okay? All of that is going to change. And unfortunately, it means that all of you out there building businesses in that economy, whether through organic or through ads, are also in the path of this change. All right, so Web 3.0. Who the fuck knows, okay? Crypto, the decentralized web, it's just out there somewhere doing whatever the hell. Maybe we'll get there some point. There was some promise for a long time that Web 3.0 was going to change everything. It turns out, even as a longtime crypto head, it's just a goddamn mess. All right, so that leads us to the agentic web. So this video is from Google I/O, a demo of the Android XR glasses powered by Gemini.
To be seeing exactly what I'm seeing through the lens of my Android XR glasses. Text from Shram that just came in. Let's see what he said. All right, it's definitely showtime, so I'm gonna launch Gemini and get us going. Send Shram a text that I'm getting started and silence my notifications, please.
Okay, I've sent that message to him and muted all your notifications.
What band is this, and how are they connected to this place?
An entire experience is unfolding. Now, extrapolate out to walking down the street, and you're looking for the best restaurant. So, what do you typically need to decide on a restaurant? You want to find the type of food you're looking for, positive reviews. Okay, so at this point, you're going to do a lot of research, and you're going to go from there based on the criteria that you're looking for. Now, in this new frame where Gemini is basically just doing everything for you, because on the back end, it's powered by all that information. And more importantly than that, it actually knows everything about you. Blood glucose levels, your dietary preferences, and it's going to prioritize all of your needs as well as the best possible options for you. And that is where we are going. Okay, so that is what the agentic web really looks like. You just ask for something, and your agent does everything, and it knows everything about you, and it prioritizes your needs. Ergo, trust signals and alignment are key here. Okay, your bot is just processing in the background the best thing for you, and then it just shows you how to get there. You never do anything, right? So what this means to me when I look at this is that the most important equation now is no longer the attention, right? Because this has mostly been solved. You just ask and you get. You're not even necessarily going onto websites anymore. In fact, my guess is 95% of websites and apps will go away because they won't have value in this web. A lot of the research stage will be just completely gone. You won't need to talk to your friends or family necessarily because your specific trained agent will know everything about you on a much deeper level than your friends and family. So what becomes left, the most important factor in this buying funnel, is the trust. So now if you're running ads, if you're doing coaching, if you're building internet businesses, you're relying on social media, you're relying on content, funnels, whatever. At this point, I hope you're starting to think, oh shit, right? Because the way that you got clients in the past was through those mechanisms. So if you actually don't have a good product and you're brute forcing your way to the top through ad spend, but in this new economy, if it comes to pass, I'm no oracle, the operators with the best social proof, the most testimonials, the best reviews, the best results from their customers are going to be the ones that are surfaced for the right people on a very granular level, potentially so granular that it comes down to health metrics and scores based on, what data your AI agent is pulling off of your Fitbit today. In other words, for the very low level, very bad products out there, I think they will just get nuked as this comes. Now, part of what's fueling this is where it gets a little bit murky because right now there's a huge black box forming. So between now and 2030, the best minds in AI have been predicting AGI or ASI sometime within this time frame. The goalpost seems to be moving a lot. So this is simply another factor that is in the mix here. We simply don't know what's coming, and that's the black box. We don't know how capitalism itself is going to potentially fundamentally change. We don't know if people are going to want our products. So this is kind of what the timeline looks like, right? At some point, AI just takes off. That was cool. And this is what all of our businesses sort of look like. And there's a black box in here. This is the black box, okay? Sorry for this terrible drawing. Yep. Now, we don't know what's going to happen after this. It could be something over here, something over here, something over here, something over here, or here, right? We could all be slaves to the machines, or we could all be living in a utopia, or we could be living in a dystopia, or we could be living in some kind of syndicalist society or hyper capitalist society, or on the moon. We don't really know, okay? And that is the problem. We don't know how fast this is coming, how quickly it's going to change everything, or it's going to look like on the other side. So it's very hard to plan for that. What the fuck can we actually do? So keep in mind that the number one reason most businesses fail is due to cash flow management, okay? So moving forward in this agentic web, in Web 2.0, the more top-heavy your business is, the more risks you're going to have, okay? So just keep that in mind. Number one, build for the AI first trust era, okay? So just get your head out of the goddamn sand and understand that things are rapidly going to change, and whatever you've been building, I don't care if it's an agency, a coaching business, a community offer, freelancing, startup, whatever, once this thing starts to accelerate and is working on itself recursively, in other words, as soon as AI starts to code AI and accelerate its own code base, you have no idea what's going to happen. You're going to be in that black box. Unless you prepare your business, you will potentially, I don't know, maybe you'll go to the moon, maybe not. Number two, understand your ecosystem risks. So I have a video on this. There are 3 big ecosystem risks. Number one is actually exposure to other people's ecosystems. If you're building inside of Google, Meta, Instagram, etc., or inside of ChatGPT, building a wrapper on top of ChatGPT, you can be wiped out with a single update, okay? Number two is the zero edge risk. If you just have nothing unique, no unique IP, no unique frameworks, nothing, there's very low trust there, okay? So again, trust signals are going to be everything, and that leads to risk number 3, which of course is the zero trust risk. If people don't trust you, it's hard to get them to buy now unless you are good at scamming them. But in the trust first economy, when the AI agent is just doing all of that information for you for research, for buying your next product, you're screwed, okay? Number 3, build your own walled gardens, okay? Companies like Google, Meta, Twitter X, Apple, this has been their strategy all along, and it's hyper accelerating right now. If you were an SEO over the last couple of years, you probably got nuked out of Google's ecosystem. So how do you fight that? You build your own ecosystems, you build your own communities, your own email lists. You bring people into your world where you are the sole person who can shape the narrative, and you have an opportunity with a direct channel to them to build more and more trust, okay? Prioritize lean models, and that's really important. What is a lean model? So if you are running with a ton of sales teams and a ton of staff, and you are constantly in this potential trap over here of poor cash flow management, this is where you're going to get nuked, okay? Because as other operators come in who have much leaner models, who are running fully agentic, fully automated, you're not going to be able to compete, okay? So you should be looking for ways, AI solutions right now, finding new ways to actually improve, speed up all of your processes, and potentially remove anything that's top heavy, okay? So top heavy businesses are going to be at risk, and you should be right now looking at ways to position yourself away from that. Build a product ecosystem. Okay, I had this conversation today with one of my coaching clients. Now, inside of any addressable market for a product, this is something that people like Tony Robbins are the GOAT at. You see, they find ways to serve tons of people inside of their potential target market at different price points and at different levels of value, because they know that not everybody is ready to buy your high ticket product, right? So inside of your potential target market, let's say this is your total addressable target market, your TAM, there's really only like a tiny segment that, that we can actually get. So if you're servicing agencies, for example, you can only target this tiny little bit. And inside of this tiny little bit, there's only like 1% that, want your high ticket product, okay? Who are willing to buy your $1,000, $2,000 course, your $10,000 mastermind. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. But if you want to grow a larger business, if this is only 1% of your target market, let's say there's another 6% that might want to buy that, but they just don't have enough trust yet. They haven't learned enough about you yet. So the way that you ascend them into into that 1% tier, because let's face it, only sociopaths, people with money, or people who have very high trust buy a product like that without a lot of touch points. The vast majority of everybody else in your audience is going to need a lot of touch points, and they're going to need a lot of trust to ever get to that 1% buyer club who want your $10,000 product, bro. So how do you move them? It's with your product ecosystem. Sell them smaller, bite-sized, low-ticket books, smaller courses, masterminds, ascension products, communities, little things that they can start to consume and learn more about you and move deeper into your ecosystem so that they eventually get to that 6%, okay? Okay, next, zig when others zag. Trust me, do this. And this is how you can start to solve this trust problem, this trust gap. When everybody else is scaling like crazy with automated content, and admittedly it's working fine right now, but it won't for long because the market will become saturated. You want to do something else. That is to solve for all the stuff that I've mentioned on this video. And one of the ways that you can zig when others are zagging is by leaning into the stuff that makes you who you are, authentically you, a human being, the polar opposite basically of what everybody else is doing. If you look closely at what's going on YouTube right now, you'll find something very interesting. There's a select group of players on there who are being just raw, authentic. People like William Brown, people like James Smith. I've learned a lot from these guys. They just give the transformational value. They present it very clearly. And what they've accomplished is building a lot of trust and goodwill with their audience who is tired of all the noise. When everybody else in your market is going one direction, go the other direction. So if you're building a business right now in the AI age, I suggest you watch this video next, where I break down the 3 big ecosystem risks for building businesses in the AI age. And don't forget that all my resources and my free community are below, so just go below this video into the description and you'll find everything you need.